Hello there, welcome to the program Anambra Votes. It is the last lap of the build-up to Saturday, November 6th governorship election in Anambra State, southeast Nigeria. Now, earlier this afternoon, the Independent National Electoral Commission, through its National Commissioner for Information and Voter Education, Festus Okoye, confirmed the readiness of the electoral body for a free, fair, and credible conduct of the elections. Sensitive election materials have already been distributed to all 21 local government areas for onward deployment to the various polling units. 5,640 of those units across the state. Now, according to Okoye, about 26,000 permanent and ad hoc staff have been mobilized and deployed across the state for the exercise. Almost 500 local and foreign media organizations have been accredited to cover the election, an indication of the intense attention the poll is generating all around. Scores of election observer groups have also been accredited by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and are on ground in Anambra to monitor the exercise. Their announcement by the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, on Thursday evening, cancelling the sit-at-home order, seemed to have eased a lot of the tension and apprehensions that had been prevalent in the state, which of course necessitated the massive deployment of security forces there. The hope and expectation now from the reports coming in from Oka and other parts of the state is that people will be emboldened to venture out of their homes and head for the polling stations on Saturday to vote for candidates of their choice. As usual with elections in Nigeria, a restriction on movement has been put in place by the police, from whether it's from outside or within the state. A restriction of movement has been put in place, and this will become effective at 12 midnight this Friday to run through to 12 midnight on Friday, when polling and collation of results of at least at the local government level would have been completed, and final collation will be ongoing at the INEC Center in the state capital, Oka. Now, all things being equal, the final results should be known by at most on Monday morning. This is no doubt an unusual election, holding under very difficult circumstances. And as the hours begin to run down to 8 a.m. on Saturday, when polling is expected to open, we will be on this hour be looking at some of the other issues and some of the other items, that the gaps, if there are any, that need to be plugged so that there can be a hitch-free and a successful governorship election in Anambra State. My name is Imoni Amarere. Stay with us. When we return from this break, we get to meet our guest analyst, someone who is here with us in the studio, and two others who will be joining us from Anambra State.
On November 6, 2021, the over 2.5 million registered voters in Anambra State will go to the polls to decide who becomes the next governor of the state. The stakes are even higher as the different political parties plot to outwit each other to clinch the big prize. AIT special program Anambra Votes brings the issues, developments, and events trailing the election right to your doorstep. Join our experienced presenters and dedicated crew on ground every weekday, 1 to 2 p.m. and 3 to 4 p.m. for daily updates as the candidates unveil their agenda. Anambra Votes live studio will also be up on Saturday, November 6 by 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1 to 4 p.m. and also on Sunday, November 7, from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. Q through Election Day events and result collation. AIT, deepening the roots of Nigeria's democracy.
Thank you so much for staying with us. It's Anambra Votes 2021, and with me in the studio is Said Hussaini. He is of the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD. Thank you so much, Said, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, also joining us via Zoom are Victor Giwa, who is an election observer, and of course, Ezenwa Nwagu. Ezenwa is the chairman of Partners for Electoral Reforms. Both of them are down there in Anambra State. Gentlemen, thank you so much for finding time to join us.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Welcome. Okay, let's begin from here in the studio side. The Anambra elections has generated a lot of attention. It has generated a lot of tension and is of interest to a very broad base of individuals, organizations, and even countries. Now, for you, what do you think is so unique about this particular election? It's not the first time we're having a governorship election in Anambra State. In fact, between 2007 and now, they have conducted, INEC has conducted 5 elections. But this is quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think paramount on the minds of observers going into this election has been the issue of insecurity. And that has emerged because of a number of key axes of concern. The first of those has been the repeated attacks by so-called unknown actors that has taken place in the state since about October last year. And these attacks have tended to target state institutions such as the offices of the police. They've also hit, even this year, INEC office, damaging critical equipment and supplies. And in the course of these attacks, we've seen the loss of life as well in the form of casualties of state institutions or state personnel in particular. So the repeated instances or occurrences of these attacks, of course, made people quite concerned about the situation in the region more generally, but particularly in Anambra State as these elections approached. And then I think the concern was further deepened when the sit-at-home orders were announced by the Indigenous Peoples of Biafra movement, IPOB. And that raised the threat level because observers then wondered whether or not there would actually be elections held. For us at the CDD, looking into this situation, we assessed the likelihood of the election actually being held and projected that it would more than likely be held because, of course, for the federal government and for its kind of key institutions that will be playing a role in this election, being INEC and the police, the necessity of holding this election was critical. And so when the police announced that they would deploy massively, and when INEC announced that it had recovered from the previous attacks that I mentioned, it suggested to us that the elections would indeed hold. But I mean, this kind of context, despite the fact that it was always going to be maybe episodic rather than a kind of full-scale crisis, it still raised a lot of concern amongst observers. So it's very cheering to see the recent news that in fact the sit-at-home order has been lifted.
All right, Ezenwa, let me come to you. A few months back, and in fact up to a few weeks back, there was a lot of doubt about whether or not this election was going to go ahead. And like Hussein said here now, at that time, there was a lot of destruction to state property, particularly facilities of the Electoral Commission at that time, and that put the elections in very serious doubt. But today, it appears the situation is a bit different. What do you think has changed between then and now?
Well, I think what has changed will be the resolve of the different stakeholders in Anambra to handle this election. If you notice, the political parties that are up, that are going to be on the ballot, have stepped up the game. None of them issued any statement countenancing some of the background that you have put forward. I hardly read anything from the political parties countenancing the fact that the situation was such that they were not going to be able to participate in the elections. I think that the people of Anambra also understand the consequences of not having this the transition 5 months from now, from an elected governor to another elected governor. If the elections does not hold, it would naturally mean a state of emergency, and the control of that is not in the hand of the stakeholders in Anambra State. Also, there is a lot of intervention also across different, the clergy, the elders of Anambra, the intelligentsia, the Igbo intelligentsia generally. They are breathing down on the extraneous influences that are trying to threaten the election, to understand that in spite of whatever it is that you're looking for, you are not yet there, and you cannot therefore hold down any part of Igbo land from participating and benefiting from this federation. So a lot of this has come to play. And more importantly, the credit will go to the determination of the Anambra people, for me, to ensure that Saturday, the November 6th, comes to play.
Giwa, let me ask you this. In fact, when the deployment of security forces started, various security units being deployed to Anambra State, there was a lot of hue and cry. The concern at that time, as it were, was that, there was going to be an policing, over militarization of Anambra State, and at the end, it may not make for free, fair, and credible elections. Do you think that that has had any positive impact so far on what is now beginning to happen, on the change of heart in different quarters and in the conduct of politicians, the political parties, and the citizens of Anambra State?
The deployment of the security agencies to Anambra State. For me, this is one of the highest I have ever seen. Over 3 AIGs, 2 DIGs, over 10 commissioner of police, and other security operatives, both civil defense and all of that. I think the deployment is actually capable of posing serious threats to the voters, and that is what our interaction with the voters in Oka and some other places have shown. A lot of people are even feeling so intimidated about coming out to vote. It has really put a lot of pressure on voters. So they are deciding, they are in a position where they start deciding whether to go out to vote, either because of the activities of the opposing element, or as a result of the activities of the security agencies. People are trying to decide, okay, we are going to vote because we have enough security, or we are not going to come out to vote because of the activities of some fifth columnists and all of that. But plus and minus, it has also given some level of confidence to some voters who honestly want to cast their vote, voters who want to ensure that their candidate wins, the election, voters who are confident of the system, voters who believe that it's an opportunity for them to change the political narrative. A lot of people, the politicians, political parties are convincing their voters to come out and vote because they believe somehow enough security, the palpable threat that they had before now, seem to have been changed as a result of the activities of the security agencies in the state. I can tell you confidently that there are a lot of security in all the nook and cranny of Anambra State, and they are not just, they are really serious. They are for serious business. If your movement right now is really monitored, restricted, you are made to explain your movement, and if you, especially from like the IG have said, the GIG have said that between 11:59 this Friday to 12:59 Saturday, there will be no movement. So it has really made a lot of voters to start thinking of coming out to vote and being assured that somehow they may have a level of security for them during the electoral process.
So you do think that it has had some kind of salutary effect on the voters at this point in time? You think that some of them may now be reconsidering their position and coming out on Saturday to cast their votes?
Yes, it is. If I got you very well, I think people are beginning to change their mind. If you notice recently, about a day or so ago, the iPod in the independent people of Biafra have come out with a release. I have seen that in social media, that they are not against the election. They have said that they are not against the election, that they want to ensure that people come out to vote, and that is what they want to do. So that is what I think they are planning to do. So that is what we think that they are going to do. That they are going to come out and vote and be voted for. That is what we believe that they are going to do. And by the grace of God, people will come out and vote.
All right. Listen, well, you have been on ground for quite a while now, at least in the last 2-3 weeks you have been on ground in Anambra State. I'm sure that you have had the opportunity of interacting with a cross-section of the critical stakeholders in the state. You have moved around quite a bit. Share your experiences with us. What is it that you have come away with these past 2-3 weeks that you have been on ground?
I got what your question is.
I said you have been on ground in Anambra State in the past 2 or 3 weeks, and you have had the opportunity of interacting with a cross-section of people, the critical stakeholders. I've seen you hold meetings here and there, give talks here and there, move around the state and all of that. Share some of your experience with these groups and what you have seen on ground with us.
Okay, I thank you, Imoni. I think there is no doubt that there is a cloud of uncertainty. We felt a cloud of uncertainty. But what has happened is that, for instance, I did trainings for Yaga. I did training for the election situation room, and also a lot of other trainings. And for Yaga Africa, that I'm a member of the board, we have deployed and trained about 499 observers that are deployed in the 21 local governments. And these 499 observers are from Anambra State. And we actually trained 500, but only one dropped out. So in that case, we have a 99% turnout, which is an excellent mark. So I think that generally what I've felt, I've gone to Newe, I've traveled around the state. A lot of people showed apprehension, but like Giwa said, we have seen much more interest in this election. But let's get back to 2017. The 2017 election was also threatened, but not in the virulent manner that we have seen currently. It was also a situation of no referendum, no election, but we saw a 22% voter turnout. And in 2019, we saw 29% in the presidential election, 29%. And in the state houses of assembly, it gets down to as much as 10%. So Anambra ordinarily are not, even in good times, so to speak, cannot be said to be people who are very, very hung up on voting. So there has been a lot of work both by the political parties, civil society organizations, and INEC, appealing to the people to up the game this time around, because these threats are not new. They may not even disappear, but the people of Anambra have a choice, and that choice is what we're going to see them come out to do on Saturday. For security, you can never say that you have adequate security, because at what point will you say the security is adequate? At what time do you even make this call about over-militarization? And my sense is that I've made the point that this is like hunger. Hunger can radicalize you. It can also weaken you. Many of the people in Anambra are emboldened now to come out to cast their votes. There are also very, very people who will also say, look, I don't feel secured. I don't know who will kill me eventually, whether it will be the extraneous influences or the police. But our call has remained that the security agencies must understand that this election, we are not going to lower the standards because it's being organized in very unusual times. The same standard of engagement is what we are going to uphold. We will ensure and look out for professionalism. We will look out for civil conduct by these security agencies who are going to be manning these elections. We are hoping that in the polling unit that there will be an armed outer layer. We are hoping that there will be armed policemen who will be able to be first responders in case there is a challenge. And in the outer aspect of the security architecture, we are hoping that there will be, military men and soldiers who will be able to deal with the situation should we have any untoward situation. So in Anambra State, I think that the different states Electoral Commission has continued to maintain that it will organize this election in spite of the uncertainties that are surrounding the election. The INEC, the security agencies through the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security have guaranteed that they will provide civil, firm security provisioning for both the electoral officials, the materials, and observers. And then the political parties are upbeat. As we speak now, many of them are still, wrecking up the moment to ensure that their people come out. And civil society organizations, the Election Situation Room, Center for Transparency, Advocacy, Yaga Africa, the GIWA group, all of us here are mobilized and talking to the people and saying that it is important for our democratic consolidation that Anambra people come out and do. And a lot of things are going to be tested now. The introduction of new polling will be tested in Anambra first time. INEC added added about 1,112 polling units in Anambra State. We are going to see how that works out now. INEC will be testing on the wider scale the BIFA, which is the electronic transfer of results and capturing of facials and fingerprints of voters. All that is going to be tested in the 21 local governments. Before now, it happened only in Delta and Nasarawa, which is a smaller election. So this election is pivotal in some of the new innovations that INEC has put on the ground. And of all of this is going to work out.
There's some interference there in the link. So we'll get back to you in a short while, hoping that the line will be much clearer at that time so that we can hear you clearly. But Said, you listen to both Giwa and Ezenwa, and I was just wondering whether or not the CSO, the civil society organizations that are monitoring, that are observing this election, did carry out any risk assessment ahead of their deployment of personnel into Anambra State.
Well, absolutely. I think for us it was very important to critically assess the conditions prevailing in the state. And as I was saying earlier, given the wider climate of insecurity that has bedeviled the region and the state particularly in the past 9 to 12 months, we had to take a very critical look at what was happening before we could send our people to the region. But I mean, beyond that, we have also, like other civil society organizations and think tanks and groups such as ours, been engaged with local observers as well. And of course, that helps to some extent to guard against the perception that it's just, or the reality that it's outsiders coming in without a clear sense of how to navigate the terrain. So engaging with local observers is important from that standpoint, and it's been one of the ways in which we've tried to mitigate the prevailing risks. But of course, we're also concerned about their own well-being. So we've made sure that we're engaging with people at the local level where they don't have to travel far distances to attend trainings or to conduct observation missions. So absolutely, the security context has been high on our minds with regards to our own programming, but we've tried to find ways to get around it such that we can achieve the ultimate objective, which is to enfranchise the voting people of Anambra State.
So in other words, you are engaging election observers from their own locality so that, one, they do not have to go too far, two, they are familiar with the terrain, and they speak the language, they know the people know them.
Exactly. That's been a critical aspect of our engagement with the state, with the election, and of our support to helping the process be a success. In addition to that, we had also conducted some previous engagements in Abuja, where we actually brought a number of journalists from the state, from some of the critical agencies of TV and broadcast journalism to Abuja to have them interface with INEC, interface with the police, air out their concerns about the election, and have these critical partners actually engage in a parley and a dialogue. So we undertook that assignment, about a month ago, and some of the conversations that took place there, we've already seen have an impact on the process that we've come to now. So this is just an overview of the sorts of activities that we've been engaged in, and an affirmation of your point that all through that process, security has had to be a part of the considerations that we've taken into account.
Given that scenario and looking at the level of apathy from 2010 to 2017 elections that has prevailed in the state, do you see some kind of change this time around?
Well, the truth is that, as Ezenwa was saying, this apathy is not new in the state, and as you've affirmed, it's been a feature of gubernatorial and even presidential elections in the state for over a decade now. To be frank, there's quite a concern that the wider context, both the non-state threats that I was describing and the heavy deployment of state security personnel, will only deepen that pre-existing level of apathy. So I think it would positively surprise a lot of observers if we saw levels of voter turnout that surpassed 2017. In all likelihood, it would be slightly lower than what we witnessed in 2017. But I don't think we should nonetheless dismiss people's capacity or desire to elect their leadership. I think it would be going too far to say that the people in the state do not have an investment in the democratic process. I think a lot more work needs to be done to understand precisely what are the obstacles that are placed in the way, or what are the factors that seem to be creating this level of apathy. But unfortunately, it appears that it's very likely that we'll see that level, if not more, apathy in this particular poll.
All right, let's go on a short break. When we return, we'll be looking at what constitutes a genuine mandate, especially in a situation where voters refuse or are unable to cast their votes, and a certain level of or number of voters a threshold rather of voting is not attained, what then constitutes genuine democratic mandate? When we return from the break. Thank you so much for staying with us. Anambra Votes 2021. As at now, we're less than 18 hours or thereabout to the opening of the polls in Anambra State. Now, somewhere along the line, Said, somebody has said that perhaps one of the challenges with voter turnout in Anambra State, and perhaps in one or two more states in Nigeria, is the privatization of politics. And that might just be responsible for why people are not too willing to turn out for elections. But the Anambra situation, going by the records from 2010, 2013 to 2017, seem to indicate that the level of apathy is very high. Can all of it be attributed to the so-called privatization of politics?
Mm-hmm. Well, it would be interesting to hear how that commentator defined privatization of politics. But I think there are certainly clues that we can discern to help us understand why it is that we're seeing such low levels of turnout. And one of the major ones might be that perhaps voters don't feel like they are seeing a substantial result for undertaking the strenuous activity of standing in the queue for long hours and actually exercising their franchise. Well, if people felt like there were important decisions, if people felt like the decision they made there could actually have an impact on their day-to-day life, in the form of the provision of basic services, in the form of the improvement of governance standards and their living conditions more generally, then it's likely that we'd see a higher level of turnout. But I think these low levels of turnout, they tell us something about the nature of the electoral process, but they surely also have wider ramifications for understanding of people's satisfaction with the quality of government that they're receiving. So while I might not be able to comment directly on that concept of privatization, we can say that this certainly reflects people's levels of satisfaction with the sort of government that they're receiving, and it's certainly low.
All right, let's go back to Awka now, but this time we'll be joining our correspondent, is Ikenna Ezenuba, who is on ground in the state capital, to give us an update on the situation there. Ikenna, how are you today?
Mark, I'm fine, and you?
Great. So tell us what exactly is ongoing there in Awka.
Presently, I am at Unizik Junction along the expressway here in Awka, the Anambra State capital. First of all, this morning we discovered a slight compliance to the sit-at-home order issued by the indigenous people of Biafra, despite a release they issued late last night, canceling the 1 week proposed sit-at-home. Then we try to go to some places within Awka to sample people's opinion with regard to the November 6th governorship election in the state. And I can tell you that there is a likelihood of voter apathy with regards to the fact that people are scared in the first place of coming out, given the militarization in the state, particularly at the state capital, Awka. And then secondly, the fact that previous elections, voters haven't really count, you know. So this had contributed to the voter apathy we saw this morning. And again, there was a press briefing by Inclusive Friends Association-led Access Nigeria in collaboration with National Democratic Institute on the plight persons with disabilities have been passing through in this country. It will interest you to know that persons with disability in Nigeria make up 15% of the voters we have in this country. And they cited in their press briefing, they cited that they sent over 200 persons with disability to measure the accessibility of polling units by persons with disabilities. And one of their findings is that there are late or should I say absence of security personnel in some personnel, I beg your pardon, in some of the polling units. And they are also advocating for a special opportunity for persons with disabilities in this forthcoming election. They also talked about the polling unit being so high for persons in wheelchairs to access the polling units and all of that. So, but you can hear the siren blaring at the background. That's to tell you how the military is trying their best to see and ensure that tomorrow's exercise is going to be a free and fair one.
All right, Ikenna, beyond that, the distribution of materials to the various polling units and polling stations in the state capital where you are, how much of it has been done?
Okay, I'm experiencing a slight network problem here, so I can't really hear what you're saying. But if I should reply from the little I heard, you are trying to know if there has been a proper distribution of voting materials. As at yesterday morning to be precise, I beg your pardon, the sensitive materials, the voting materials were leaving the vault of the Central Bank of Nigeria to their respective voting centers across the 21 local government areas of the state, with heavy security escorts following them. So it's one thing to have these voting materials properly distributed across the 21 local government areas of the state. Is another thing for people to come out and ensure they vote and make sure their vote count, not just voting and not just coming out to vote, but ensure that their vote count. And thirdly, to ensure that the militaries are not just fully on ground to pose a threat to the voters who are already apprehensive on what tomorrow's election is likely going to be, because we already know that Anambra South is the flashpoint when it comes to this forthcoming governorship election, given the fact that some of the candidates, APC, PDP, are called as, in fact, 90% of the contestants for this governorship election are from Anambra South, except for Obiora Okonkwo of ZLP, who is from Anambra North. So the apprehension is already there, and we are just hoping, because right now everything is just on hopes. We are just hoping that we don't really have any record of violence.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ikenna Ezenuba, for filling us in on that, on the developments and, of course, the situation in Awka, the Anambra State capital. We hope to link up with you tomorrow morning when, of course, polls will open and we'll see what the turnout is going to look like and the conduct is. Thank you so much. All right, let's see if we can get back to Victor Giwa now. Victor Giwa, if you can hear me, you are a lawyer. And as a lawyer, a lot of legal issues are being thrown up as to what constitutes the legal definition of an acceptable turnout for a legitimate election. Is there anything like that? Victor, you have to unmute to enable us hear you here in the studio. Hello, Victor. Well, we seem not to be connecting with Victor, but if Ezenwa is ready and is with us, we could go to Ezenwa Nwagu, who is also stay there in Awka, Anambra State. Can you hear us, Ezenwa?
I didn't hear you, but I didn't hear the question that you posed.
Yes,
but
no,
I would
that
just
question was actually meant for Victor, but the other side of that question is the whole question of the import of a democratically elected public official when voters refuse to turn out to cast their votes. What then is an acceptable threshold? What is an acceptable threshold of the number of votes that can put a public official in power?
I can't hear you, but I think if you can hear me, you've asked Victor what could be the threshold for legitimate election, and I think it's 1/4 of those who present themselves. 1/4 of those who present themselves in the 2/3 of the local governments. There are basic. Yes. From your correspondence, there are things that that were raised, which I think we could further interrogate. The first will be the question of, you have 2.5 million voters in Anambra State. 76,000 new voters were added to the voter register that made up the 2.5 million voters. And if the statistics that we have is anything to go by, before the 76%, you only had 22% in the governorship election in 2017, which was also threatened. We need to continually underscore this point, that the 2017 election was threatened the way. So when we talk to people, we need to be able to know whether the people we are talking to are even voters in the first instance. Because Anambra has a population, estimated population of 6 million people, and 2.5 are registered to vote. Out of that, in the history of Anambra State, 1 million people have never voted in any election since 2015. So it's important to keep underscoring that point, that we need to continue to appeal to the people of Anambra, because the conditions for voting has been made more friendlier. Polling units are closer to people's homes, and which means that they do not need transportation to go to vote, and they are voting in their communities. They are voting in their communities. So we can't say that the reason why people have not been voting in Anambra is because their votes don't count. It is the votes of the people who come out that counts. 200 and something number of people, 100,000 people voted the current governor. In the past, about 197,000 people have voted the governor in this state, in a voting population of close to 2 million people. So the idea of the reason why they don't vote is because their votes don't count does not arise. When votes will only be counted by those who present themselves to vote. So we need to be very clear about that. And we also have riverine communities in Anambra State. The materials have been sent to all those places without hitches, according to the Independent National Electoral Commission. Observer groups have trained and deployed their observers who are from Anambra State to the 21 local governments of the states. So in terms of preparation, the structures, the stakeholders for this election are ready for election. The people themselves are naturally not voting people, because for them, government is still very much in absentia. And we need to underscore that. They are traders. They don't feel so much that government has. But the same people pay a lot of attention to their community and what do you call them? The President General of their communities. There are Supreme Court cases for President General in Anambra State as we speak now. So we can't make excuses for those who do not want to vote. We should appeal to those who will want to vote and say, look, the security agency, there's a enabling condition for you to come out and vote this time around. that should give courage, that should embolden them to come out and vote. And also remember that during elections, people travel from the city centers to their villages as a matter of what we know for our elections. That people do not naturally, most of the time, the city centers are empty. It is the rural areas that you have the people are concentrated in. And Anambra has no history of election violence. Anambra has no history of election violence. It has much more history of going to court, challenging every step up to Supreme Court. That's what we know for Anambra people. In their history, they do not fight because of elections. So that needs to be contextualized, and so that we can present this properly to the people to understand. One of the biggest challenges that this election has is intentional scaremongering. Intentional scaremongering, and that is coming from deliberateness. So we need to watch out for fake news. We need to watch out for people who don't even understand the language and climate of election and in the kind of public narrative that is being put out. So between now and tomorrow, all efforts of stakeholders should be on asking the people of Anambra to come out in their numbers and vote, because it is important for them to do so. You cannot ask how is it shared if you are not where it's being shared. You can't continue to be somewhere. You live in Lagos, you live in different places. You say you don't want this person, you don't want this person, but you are not there. You are not coming out to vote. You hoist all kinds of regime of excuses for why you are not going to come out to vote. We need to stop that and ask the people to, within the circumstances, within the conditions that are prevalent in their state, they should do the needful, which is to come out on Saturday and cast their votes and have a legitimate representation. Because when you vote, you have legitimized the government that is running. So it doesn't matter the number of people that have voted. If in 6 million population, less than 1 million people vote, that 1 million people have decided for you, and you cannot make an excuse for that.
All right, thank you so much. I hope that we are able to get across to Victor Giwab. I'm not sure the network is aligned that to happen. But Said, let's get back to here very quickly. The innovations that are being put in place by INEC now, they have come up with the BVAS device, which will replace the previous device that was used. That's the card reader that had been used since 2015. They are abolishing incident forms. And that BVAS also, apart from the fact that it registers your fingerprints and your facial authentication, has the capacity to also upload, has a camera that can upload results from the polling level to the INEC viewing center, which simplifies a lot of these things. Do you think that these and all the other innovations that have been put in place will contribute positively to a more credible exercise?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and we've said so in a number of our publications that INEC has taken some praiseworthy steps to ensure that this election is more credible. And you're right to point out that the bimodal voter authentication accreditation system is one of them, because of course, one issue that we've seen in previous elections at the governorship level, at the presidential level, is the failure to authenticate fingerprints, having voters, leaving certain numbers of voters unable to actually cast their ballots. So to the extent that this new technology can get around that, then it is certainly a laudable step forward. I think the other quite major innovation here is less technical, but still as important to highlight, is the question of the increase of polling units. And your correspondent was talking about increasing access for people with disabilities and for people who might not have the means to travel long distances to cast their ballot. I think that's quite a notable accomplishment to have had INEC expand the number of polling units, because it means that in a very literal sense, democracy has been brought closer to home for a number of people. Optimally, we would anticipate and hope that this would have a positive impact on voter turnout. But of course, as the presenter right before me was speaking about, the issue of voter turnout is a kind of multifaceted concern that will require interventions on multiple directions, not only into the process. And it's not simply, unfortunately, a matter of just urging people to go out, but it will also require that voters start to see some dividends, as it were, to the exercise of their franchise. So your original question about the innovations INEC has introduced, I think, is a very important one, and it's important to highlight that INEC is making some progress and creating an enabling environment through expanding the legislative scope for what INEC can actually do in these elections will only serve to further expand the scope of technological and other innovations that the Commission can put in place.
One of such innovations, for instance, is the decision by the electoral body to have color codes for each local government. All the 21 local governments in Anambra now have different color codes for this election. And as I've been told, it will make it difficult for you to want to take votes, whether genuine or fabricated, from one local government and place them in another local government.
Absolutely. An additional innovation has been the increased introduction of online processes in INEC's preparation for elections, which includes online voter registration. It includes the increased access for journalists or observers to register online. So I think this variety of innovations that we've seen occur in recent Nigerian elections could have some influence, in actually making the process more credible and ensuring voters that their votes, at least in the counting process, will be accounted for.
Thank you so much, Saeed Hussein. Saeed is of the Center for Democracy and Development, CDD. Thank you for joining us here in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Ezewa Nwagu, who is the chairman partners for electoral reforms, he joined us via Zoom from Awka, the Anambra State capital. So also the Victor Giwa, who is an election observer, who also joined us from Awka in Anambra State. Gentlemen, thank you for your time, and we wish you the very best right there in Anambra State. And we look forward to rejoining you on Saturday to give us your impressions of the conduct of the elections. For our viewers out there, we want to thank you for investing your time with us on Anambra Votes 2021. We'll be with you again at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning, November 6th, when the elections kick off, as it were, in the entire 21 local governments of Anambra State. My name is Imoni Amarere. Bye for now.